Raise your head, Cocytus. Could you tell me your request? There was no anger in that even voice, which only made it more frightening. The fear Cocytus felt was akin to seeing the bottom of a clear lake, and knowing that one was about to be sucked in. Cocytus's equipment granted him resistance to fear and mind-affecting effects originating from external sources. Therefore, the fear assailing him now sprang from within his own heart. After gulping, to be precise, it would be like swallowing a mouthful of venom. Cocytus slowly raised his head and looked at his master and ruler. Points of bright red fire danced within the empty orbits of his eye sockets. I say again, can you tell me your request? He could not speak. He had tried several times, but the words caught in his throat, and nothing came out of his mouth. What's wrong? Cocytus? A weighty silence filled the air. I am not angry at you. I merely wish to know what you are thinking, and what you are asking. His tone was gentle, as though trying to placate a quiet child. In the face of this, Cocytus finally managed to speak. I oppose the extermination of the lizard men, and I beg that you will show them your mercy, Ainz-sama. After that simple, direct statement, Cocytus thought that the air was trembling. No, it was actually trembling. The greatest source of that came from in front of him, from Albedo's murderous intent, followed by the quailing of the other guardians' hearts. In contrast, Demiurge and his master seemed as calm as still water. Cocytus, do you understand what you are saying? Albedo's frigid, murderous tone made Cocytus shudder, despite his immunity to the cold. Ainz-sama ordered you to exterminate the lizard man to expiate your sins, but you would deny his will, as the guilty party. Cocytus, guardian of the fifth floor, are you afraid of the lizard men? She sounded like she was mocking him, but Cocytus could not retort with anything. Albedo's attitude was only to be expected. If he were in her place, Cocytus would most likely be quite angry too. Why don't you speak? What silenced Albedo was not the sound of speech, but the sound of a collision. It was the high-pitched impact of a staff against the ground. Be quiet, Albedo. I am asking Cocytus a question. Contain yourself. My deepest apologies. I beg your forgiveness. Albedo bowed in an apology, and returned to her previous location. Cocytus's master turned to transfix him with a keen gaze. There was no reading his expression. He looked like he was brimming with anger, but at the same time he appeared quite bemused. Then, Cocytus, does that request of yours hold any benefit to the great underground tomb of Nazareth? Tell me. Yes. I in the future. They might breed mighty warriors. Therefore, it would be a shame to wipe them all out. Right now, your servant submits that it would be better to instill a strong sense of loyalty among them, so that when stronger lizard men appear, we can take them as minions. That is quite a good idea. There's little difference in the levels of the undead made from lizardman corpses compared to those made with human corpses. There is no need to worry about lizardman corpses if we can efficiently recover the bodies buried in Irantal. Just as Cocytus was about to continue, he sensed that his master was not finished yet. The unease within his heart took material form. However, the undead I make with corpses are more economical than making use of lizard men. Not only can we be sure of their loyalty, but we will not have to worry about their care and feeding. The only advantage I can see in the lizard men is that they will naturally increase in population, and that increase will take a long time to be seen. Do tell me if I am missing anything out. Are there any sufficiently convincing advantages they possess? If Cocytus could persuade his merciful master, his wish could come true. However, Cocytus could not think of anything. He had always thought of himself as a weapon to be wielded by his master. As a result, he had never thought on his own account before, which was why he could not convince his master. He had not considered what to do in order to benefit the group. In addition, his master desired gains for the great underground tomb of Nazarick. Cocytus did not wish to exterminate the lizard men, because they had outstandingly brilliant people among them. In other words, he wished to spare the lizard men, because he wanted to spare those talented individuals. That was a personal consideration, paying no heed to the bigger picture. Cocytus's heart burned with anxiety. If he displeased or angered his silent master, this miraculous chance to make a suggestion would be all for naught, leaving him with the order to exterminate the lizard men. He racked his brains as hard as he could, but he could not find an answer. What's wrong, Cocytus? Can't think of anything? Then it'll be extermination, no? It was the same question from before. Cocytus's mind was a complete blank. His mouth felt like it weighed a ton, and his thoughts simply spun in circles. A quiet muttering filtered through the silent throne room. Really now? What a shame. Just as those words of whispered regret threatened to crush the very breath from Cocytus, he was aided by a calm voice. Ainz, please permit me to interject. What is it, Demiurge? Is something the matter? Yes. It concerns the decision you made just now, Ainz. If it pleases you, may I be allowed to supply my humble opinion? By all means. Yes. Ainz, I am certain you understand the importance of experiments. Therefore, should we not use the lizard men for experiments as well? Oh, now that does sound interesting. Cocytus imagined that when his master leaned forward from his throne, his red eyes had met his own for a fraction of a second. Yes. To begin with, regardless of how Nazarick turns out in the end, we will ultimately need to gather various forces or exert control over various species. Your servant submits that when that time comes, there will be a great difference in the results depending on whether or not we have performed experiments in rulership. Demiurge straightened himself up further, looking his master, who was seated upon his throne, straight in the eye, and delivered his summation. I feel that we should take control of the lizard man village, and conduct experiments in ruling without the use of terror. The high-pitched ringing of the staff slamming into the floor echoed all around. An excellent suggestion, Demiurge. I am deeply grateful. Then, I shall make use of Demiurge's suggestion concerning the lizard men. They are not to be exterminated, but subjugated. Are there any objections? Raise your hands if there are. The crimson eyes swept across all the guardians. It seems there are none. Then it is decided. Everyone bowed in acknowledgement. That said, your suggestion was quite outstanding, Demiurge. Very impressive. Demiurge smiled. I would not dare, Ainz. I imagine you must have already known about that, but you were only waiting for Cocytus to bring it up. His master did not answer, only smiled bitterly. However, his master's attitude said everything. Cocytus felt that his body had gone slack all of a sudden. He had suffered an ignominious defeat, while commanding the glorious armies of Nazarick. He had opposed his master's wishes without preparing any other alternatives to his will. How could he describe his performance? He had been so incompetent. How incompetent am I, anyway? No, there's nothing of the sort, Demiurge. You praise me too highly. I was merely hoping that you would express your opinions, regardless of what they were. His master's gaze shifted again, lingering on Cocytus for the longest time. He understood what his master was implying, but he could not lower his head. The most important thing is to understand the true meaning of your orders. After doing so, you must take the most appropriate action. Listen well, guardians. Do not blindly follow orders. You must think before you act, and consider how best Nazarick can prosper from your actions. If you feel your orders are in error, or if you have a better alternative, then you must tell me, or the person proposing the idea. Then Cocytus, I believe I said I was going to punish you, did I not? Yes. You ordered me to exterminate the lizard men. Indeed. Now, however, we will not destroy them, but place them under our rule. As a result, I will alter your punishment. You will rule the lizard men, and you will instill a deeply rooted loyalty to Nazarick within them. You are forbidden from ruling them with fear. Instead, you will turn the lizard men into a model of rulership without terror. Cocytus had never borne such a weighty responsibility before. No, among the Guardians, only Demiurge had this sort of experience. It'll be hard to complete this mission by myself. That thought appeared briefly in Cocytus's mind, but how could he admit to such weakness now? He could not say such things to the compassionate ruler to whom he owed his ultimate fealty, or to the colleague who had lent him a helping hand. Understood. I have my concerns about the task, so I may need to call on the aid of others. Of course. In addition, this matter will require considerable resources, rations, and manpower. Nazarick will supply those. Thank you very much. I, Cocytus, guarantee that I will show you good results, and that the mercy you have shown will not be in vain. Ainz-sama, Cocytus shouted. Very well. Then, I now order all the Guardians to move out. One team shall serve as distractions, while another will demonstrate our power, and show the lizardmen that our strength is not limited to what they have seen. Of course, if you feel that may affect your future rule, I can rescind that order, Cocytus. Cocytus thought carefully about the matter, and then replied, I feel that it will not pose any problems. I see. Then, all Guardians, prepare to move out. As one, the gathered Guardians indicated their assent. Albedo, I will be heading out as well. Prepare our forces. Understood. After considering that we may have foes who enjoy spying on us, can I assume that this is intended to deceive them about our true intentions? Just so.
However, do not forget that we must strike fear into the hearts of our opposition. Then, perhaps we can send out the old guard of Nazarick as the main body of our forces so they will look more impressive. Cocytus agreed with Albedo's response. There was a type of undead guard called the Old Guard. The Old Guard of Nazarick were high-level undead sentries which were only found within the great underground tomb of Nazarick. They wielded weapons with all sorts of magical effects, and they were equipped with enchanted armor and shields. In addition, they possessed many refined combat skills, making them excellent undead sentries. That should be fine. How many of them are there? They number 3,000. Seems a bit too little. It will be hard to convey the desired shock effect with those numbers. Our objective is to win a complete victory and frighten those who underestimate Nazarick. If we field fewer troops than before, it will mean nothing, so you would like to deploy at least double the forces from the previous engagement. What other forces can we use? Then, how about mobilizing the Nazarick Elder Guards and the Nazarick Master Guards? That way we will have 6,000 people. As expected of the Guardian Overseer, Albedo replied smoothly and immediately. Ainz's response was simple and clear. Excellent. Then, were there any problems when activating Gargantua? No, Ainz-sama. There were no problems in its activation. Then, we got to send our forces over together. However, my mana might run out if I have to do it alone. Ask Pestonia to help. Have her transfer mana to you. If that's not enough, get Lupus Regina to help as well. Understood. After that, transfer nigredos and Pandora's actors warning grid to me. This will weaken our surveillance on Sebas, but that use means we need to focus on physical observation.
Very well. Then, carry on, everyone. Tomorrow, we shall show the lizardmen the power of the great underground tomb of Nazareth. Part 2. Thank you, Demiurge. Once his master left, the first thing Cocytus did was express his gratitude to Demiurge. Demiurge responded to the deeply bowed Cocytus with the same serene smile as always. No, there's no need for thanks. How could that be? Without your help, the lizard men would have been exterminated. Cocytus, I believe the reason why Ainz Sama approved of your suggestion was because Ainz Sama had foreseen such a development. As Demiurge delivered his summation with an upraised finger, a startled gasp rang through the air. The sound seemed to have come from himself, or the guardians around him. In other words, I believe Ainz Sama anticipated that you would say such a thing. That was why he sent you to the Lizardman village. I felt that was the case because Ainz Sama seemed most delighted to hear you oppose the destruction of the Lizardmen village. In contrast, he sounded quite disappointed when you could not bring up an alternative solution. You mean to say Ainz Sama was disappointed because things did not go according to plan? Precisely. In other words, even the conversation we are having now might well have been foreseen by Ainz Sama. As expected of Ainz Sama. He has planned everything out with meticulous perfection. Biba Aya, spit it out. Ora bade her little brother Mare to speak, in a stern tone of voice. Ah, why yes. Ah, I was wondering why he had sent out such weak undead at first. Ah. Perhaps Ainz Sama had planned on the attack failing from the start. Well, rather than say that he had planned to be defeated, isn't it more like our master had anticipated that Cocytus would have investigated the lizardman's strength and then mentioned that victory might be in doubt? A profound sense of shame fell over Cocytus, as he remembered his exchange with Demiurge back then. After all, he had messed everything up. He couldn't have come up with something like that if he didn't understand Cocytus so well. Well, that's Ainz Sama for you. While we have already seen Ainz Sama's outstanding warrior prowess during the battle with Shaltir, to think he also possessed such extraordinary talent as a schemer. I cannot help but prostrate myself before him in awe. While Ainz Sama may have said otherwise, I feel that nothing can go wrong if we simply obey Ainz Sama's orders. He's really amazing. He truly lives up to the name of the one who united all the supreme beings. Shaltir excitedly added her own praise after Demiurge's. The other guardians nodded in agreement. Diamond suit, diamond suit, diamond suit. After returning to his room, Ainz jumped onto his bed. He hung briefly in the air before his body sank into the bed, and then he started to roll. He rolled right, and then he rolled left. The bed was big enough for him to do so. His luxurious robe was crumpled from this, but Ainz paid it no heed, giggling quietly as he rolled around. The reason Ainz was doing such a childish thing was because there was nobody in this room besides him. Soon, Ainz had indulged his childish desire for the soft sheets. He then lay on his back, facing the ceiling. Ah, I'm so tired. Ah, I want to loosen up and get drunk, although I can't do that now. After complaining to the air, he sighed deeply, although Ainz could not breathe, so he was just going through the motions. Ainz was undead, so physical and mental exhaustion were foreign to him. However, in human terms, he had spent every day hard at work for the past month. If he had a stomach, it would be in ruins by now. Ainz was currently filled with stress. The warrior Mammon had defeated the silver-haired vampire, Shaltir. Perhaps someone who was not in full possession of the facts might think it was simply impressive, but to the mysterious person who had used a world-class item on Shaltir, it would mean something else. The opposition might have their eye on Ainz, or they might try to make contact with him. Therefore, Ainz spent his days on high alert, with many cache items ready so he could make his escape at any time. During his free time, he indulged in a little bit of mental roleplay, or exercising his imagination, more like, and studied whether he would be able to escape if the enemy came for him, while at the same time gathering information about his foe. This nerve-wracking daily life had little effect on Ainz Ulgaun, but it tired out the remnants of his humanity, of Suzuki Satoru's personality. The reason why he indulged in immature behavior, when he was alone, and had free time, was probably a sign that Suzuki Satoru was under a lot of stress, hidden beneath the facade of Ainz. I don't remember ever working without rest or sleep like this. I wonder how much overtime I'll get this month. Perhaps that griping had come from the personality of Suzuki Satoru overriding that of Ainz. The great underground tomb of Nazarick, no, Ainz Ulgaun, isn't a stock corporation. As a joint venture company, we're supposed to be a moral enterprise, so we ought to pay all employees the overtime they're due. After whining to himself like that, Ainz furrowed his non-existent eyebrows. Don't tell me I'm not entitled to overtime because I have a post allowance? Yuwa. Ainz rolled around again, and then froze after about half a dozen iterations. All right, that's enough useless thinking for one day. That said, I'm really impressed that Cocytus actually said something like that. It had come as quite a surprise. To think Cocytus actually felt sympathy for the lizard men. In truth, Cocytus's actions had been a big headache for Ainz. Suzuki Satoru was the sort of person who would thoroughly research his sources and regurgitate them by rote when called upon to deliver a briefing. Therefore, he was not used to dealing with unexpected things. However, as long as it was written down in his notes, he could use them to deal with it. In other words, the success of Suzuki Satoru's briefings rested on how much research he did, and how well he could use it to respond to the circumstances. He was extremely inept in dealing with situations which required adaptability. In fact, he hated them. He could not bring his notes into the throne room and say, please look at the next page. Therefore, Ainz had mentally rehearsed the events in the throne room over 10 times beforehand. As he did, he prayed that nobody would do anything surprising. And then, Cocytus had shattered that tiny wish of his. He had been extremely worried about what Cocytus would say, but he was also very happy. That was the joy a parent might have, as though a hitherto docile and obedient child had expressed his own opinion for once. The important thing was that Cocytus's growth had far exceeded Ainz's expectations. When Ainz had returned to Nazarick earlier, he had asked one of the maids to cook something, a steak. Perhaps she might need practice when it came to the doneness and other major points of the meal, but Ainz did not have such high expectations of the steak. Neither did he want food which granted bonuses, like food in Yggdrasil. All he wanted was something edible. However, the result could only be described as a lump of charcoal. No matter how often that maid practiced, she could only make chunks of charred meat. Ainz had accepted that outcome as he accepted the maid's heartfelt apologies. After all, it was the same as him trying to equip the greatsword in his wardrobe. In Yggdrasil, one needed specialized skills to make food. It was only to be expected, since food and drink could grant special bonuses when consumed. However, that maid did not possess such skills. In other words, if one lacked the proper skills to perform a task, it would end in failure. The matter of Cocytus was also an experiment of sorts. Ainz wanted to see if finalized characters like himself and the NPCs could learn anything new. This experiment was designed to see if they could grow strong by learning tactics and strategy. He had given Cocytus command over the weak undead, because he felt that he would be able to learn more from their defeat. In the end, Ainz had been pleased with the results. Cocytus had shown Ainz that he had the possibility for growth. Of course, there was a huge difference between theory and practice. Ainz's upcoming objective was to thoroughly master the details of this world's unique magic, if such magic existed. Currently, Ainz was still unclear whether magic was a skill or knowledge. However, this experiment showed that one's knowledge could still grow. Cocytus had proved the possibility of that development. He had done very well. Ainz thought. A lack of growth was equivalent to stagnation. Even if he was powerful now, he might be surpassed one day. Even if he had 100 years advantage in military technology, he would still lose his pole position if he did not continue improving himself. There might be a strong nation nearby, but they would be utter fools if they assumed that they would always be a strong nation, and did not seek improvement. Well, I think that, but while I'm happy that the kids have grown, I'm also worried if I'm a ruler who's worthy of their loyalty. Ainz looked at the veiling as he muttered this. Ah, it's so scary, I'm so scared. The remnants of Suzuki Satoru's personality wailed in fear of the unknown. Growth was change. Then, who could guarantee that their absolute loyalty would not change? Even if it did not, he was still afraid that someday, they would consider him unworthy of being the ruler of the glorious Nazarick. He feared being forced out of his position as guildmaster. I have to become a leader that the Guardians will want to follow. Why isn't there anyone to teach me the path of rulership? There was probably nobody in Nazarick who was designed for such a purpose. As Ainz fell into contemplation, he thought of two people, from the 5 worsts of Nazarick. One of them was Kyuhuku, who bore the title of Duke, and the other was Gashikukachuo, who had the title of King. Ainz wondered if he could ask them to teach him, and his answer was simple and succinct. Hell no. He did not want to learn from them unless he had no other choice. Forget it. As long as I don't mess up too much, I won't need to retire. Also yes, about those 2-legged sheep. Ainz had already surmised the true identity of the 2-legged sheep, which was why he had not asked about their appearance. They were monsters he had seen in Yggdrasil before. They have the heads of a lion and a goat, and a serpentine tail. Their hands are those of lions and their feet are those of goats. They are Chimerae. In Yggdrasil, Chimerae walked on 2 legs, attacking with lion's paws, which served as arms. Each of them had 2 heads, one of a lion and one of a goat. That was because these monsters were based on the visual data of monsters known as Baphomets. So why had Demiurge not come out and said that they were Chimerae? Ainz had his doubts, but then he also had an answer. In other words, they're mutant Chimerae. Am I right, Demiurge? Ainz chuckled, and then he added a mental note to his opinion of Demiurge. He had terrible naming sense. Well, the Chimera lords in Yggdrasil looked kind of, no, fish-like Chimerae looked disgusting. So these 2-legged sheep are a new breed of Chimera, that makes them Holy Kingdom Chimerae. It might be good to bring one of them to Nazarick. And then there's Victim, HM. Victim looked just like how Ainz remembered, but one thing stood out in his mind. The language he's using? Is that Enochian, the language of angels? It feels like he's saying something else entirely. It was translated, so Ainz did not know what sort of language he was using, but it felt weird to him. Of course, that might be because Ainz did not know Enochian at all. Forget it, let's not worry about it. Alright, it's about time to set out. Ainz rolled around again. He stopped when he was face down, to verify something that had been bothering him since just now. He pressed his face to the bed, and sniffed. Ainz had no lungs, so he was merely going through the motions. Strangely enough, he could smell something. This is the smell of flowers. Did someone spray perfume on this bed? Are the beds of the wealthy like this? That's pretty surprising. Maybe I should keep them in mind when I'm pretending to be wealthy, then? Part 3. There was an ability known as danger sensing. Among adventurers, thieves and those with sensory skills prized that ability. As the name implied, it allowed its user to sense danger. There were 2 main variations of this ability. One kind disregarded logic and analysis, making snap decisions based on one's perceptions. The other was the product of experienced reasoning and deduction. The proverbial 6th sense and intuition belonged to the first category, while those who picked up on minute sensory traces and observed changes in the environment fell into the latter category. One would naturally learn the second type, when on the battlefield, or when traveling alone, even if one did not go out of the way to hone it. It was a form of experience gained from being in hazardous environments. The lizardmen were superior to humans in that aspect. This was because their biological abilities, their senses, were sharper, and because they lived in more hostile conditions. A human being would typically live in a safe place that was far away from monsters, but lizardmen often had monsters as neighbors. In Zaryusu's case, he was a traveler, and thus used to long, solo journeys. Thus, he could accurately and keenly gauge the changes in the air and mood. His eyes snapped open as he sensed a tension filtering through the air. The familiar sight of the room, although he had only lived there for a few days, greeted him. However closely a human looked, they would not be able to see within the lightless interior, but that was not a problem for lizardmen. There was nothing unusual about the room. Zaryusu looked around, and breathed a sigh of relief after making sure that there was nothing unusual around. At the same time, he sat up. As an outstanding warrior, Zaryusu could go from sound asleep to fully awake in an instant. His eyes would not be weighed down by sleep, he could charge into battle right now with no problems. This was also related to the lizardman habit of light sleeping. However, Crush showed no signs of stirring from where she was sleeping beside him. All she did was moan softly as she was deprived of Zaryusu's warmth. Under normal circumstances, Crush should have sensed the change in the air and woken from her slumber. However, she did not seem to have done so. A sense of regret filled Zaryusu. Had he placed too much of a burden on Crush? As he recalled last night, he felt that perhaps Crush's burden was greater than his own. It would seem that the female Crush had been under more strain than the male Zaryusu during the process of defeating the Elder Lich. He would have liked for her to be able to continue sleeping, but upon listening carefully, he could hear the sounds of many lizardmen hurrying around. In an emergency like this, it would be more dangerous to let her sleep than to wake her up. Crush, Crush. Zaryusu shook Crush several times, using some force. HM? MMM. After twitching her tail,